At the spot where its cage once stood, he sat down with his legs crossed. Closing his eyes, he seemed to be quietly waiting for something. Many were puzzled by Lu Sheng's actions. General Yu watched the screen intently, his face always bearing a hint of amusement. Unconcerned with the questions from the fellow officers, he dismissed them with a wave of his hand, commanding, "Let Lu Sheng do as he wishes. Leave him be." The other officers exchanged bewildered glances. General Yu was allowing Lu Sheng to have his way. This military star selection that spanned the entire eastern region seemed to have lost its significance in Yu's eyes at this moment. A muscular figure suddenly burst out of the passageway. Rocky was panting heavily, trying hard to recover his energy. The beast he had just encountered was incredibly powerful. Even for him, it took a lot of effort to take it down. What's more, even though he had the protection of iron skin, he was still injured, and he could still feel the stinging pain. Thinking he was the first to arrive, Rocky glanced towards the other passages. After confirming that no one was present, he let out a sigh of relief. However, when his gaze shifted to a platform not far in front of him, his pupils constricted sharply. He saw someone. To be precise, a young man. But what truly startled Rocky was what was behind the young man. He saw a beast resembling a gorilla, standing about 10 meters tall, covered in jet-black hair, with limbs so muscular they seemed thicker than tree trunks. Just a distant glance emitted an overwhelming aura of fierceness, sending chills down his spine. However, what shocked Rocky the most wasn't encountering the gold-eyed demon ape. It was the fact that this gold-eyed demon ape was dead, merely a corpse. A huge bloody hole was torn open in its chest, and its entire body was deeply embedded into the wall, as if it had been punched hard into the wall and turned into a decorative specimen. He wanted to ask the young man on the platform but hesitated, unsure how to proceed. Bowing cautiously, he politely asked if he had passed the selection. Lu Sheng simply said one word, "Wait." At that moment, clear footsteps echoed from 2 nearby corridors. Rocky's expression instantly turned calm as he quickly looked in both directions. Soon after, 2 figures emerged from the corridors, one after the other. They all immediately recognized each other. Upon making eye contact, a mutual wariness was evident in their expressions. Then they both noticed the young man on the platform and the visually striking scene behind him. All 3 of them looked at the corpse of the demon ape, deeming it to be quite terrifying. They didn't expect such a powerful beast to be here. Rocky suddenly realized that this person might be the guardian of their final selection challenge. David and Amy frowned slightly, about to speak, when a clear voice rang out from the platform, saying, "Rocky is very smart." The trio immediately looked up. There, the handsome young man on the platform had already opened his eyes and stood up. Gazing down at them, he said he would give the trio some time to rest. Lu Sheng stretched out both hands, smiling invitingly, telling the 3, as long as they defeat him, they will all pass the selection. Rocky eyes sparkled, revealing an "I knew it" expression on his face. Seeing that they didn't have to face the demon ape made them feel relieved. Yet the final challenge was a young man of similar age to them. The girl glanced at Lu Sheng, deeming him to be just an ordinary student and probably weak. Rocky sneered. He wondered if the Eastern Military District was mocking them. David also had an icy look on his face. Each of them took out a blue pill from their pockets and swallowed it, preparing to restore their strength. In their minds, the 3 of them were the strongest martial arts prodigies under 18 in the Eastern region. What did they have to fear from one person? Seeing the 3 of them concentrating on recovering, Lu Sheng revealed a satisfied smile, looking at his wristwatch, counting down every second. In the monitoring room, many officers' mouths twitched with speechlessness. Who would have thought that Lu Sheng would actually pretend to be the final boss of the selection, playing a game with the 3 prodigies? Even General Yu was amused, laughing heartily. He commented, "This Lu Sheng is interesting, very interesting." Shortly after, a few officers stood up and protested. They requested to end the selection immediately. They believed that this prodigy was much stronger than the others, possibly causing irrevocable physical and psychological damage to other prodigies. Chin noticed that these individuals were precisely the instructors backing the three participants. It made sense, worried that their prodigies would be broken by Lu Sheng's freakish strength. Snowy couldn't help but chuckle. Even the appearance of a peak level 4 demon ape hadn't elicited such a reaction from the crowd. This just showed how dangerous Lu Sheng had become in the eyes of everyone. Upon hearing the concerns raised, General Yu thought for a moment and ordered the supervisory team to be on high alert, ready to intervene at any time to ensure Lu Sheng didn't severely harm the trio. Richard was the most distressed at the moment. Not only had he just played himself, but he had also lost 3 units of valuable high-level beast marrow. Time passed quickly. Rocky stood up from the ground, cracking his neck and fist. The crisp cracking sounds from his joints indicated that he had restored around 90% of his energy. Amy had regained about 80%, and David around 90%. They believed they were more than prepared to face Lu Sheng. The atmosphere in the room grew tense. Everyone's eyes were glued to the screen, awaiting the showdown between the 4 young prodigies. Snowy whispered to herself, "This is going to be an epic battle." Everyone in the monitoring room braced themselves, ready for what was sure to be an unforgettable match. The eyes of the 3 burned with intensity as they fixed their gaze on Lu Sheng, who stood atop the demon ape's corpse. From his elevated position, Lu Sheng looked down at the trio. Sensing the fiery battle spirit radiating from them, a satisfied smile appeared on his face. Pointing at them, he beckoned them to come up all at once. Rocky, however, laughed heartily, believing he alone was enough. Rocky fiercely pushed off the ground, charging straight at Lu Sheng. The other 2 didn't seem to mind. They thought they could use Rocky to test the gatekeeper's strength. Both were well aware that among the 3 of them, Rocky was the strongest. And now, Rocky had already leaped into the air, his right fist raised high. With a wildly unrestrained posture, he aimed a fierce punch directly at Lu Sheng. They all thought Lu Sheng might not even be able to withstand a single punch from Rocky. Yet Lu Sheng, standing at the very center of the platform, calmly lifted a hand, blocking the punch with just a single finger. He then, with an effortless motion, counterattacked. Yawning, a silhouette was sent flying backward at a blistering speed, traveling dozens of meters before shooting straight into the corridor he came from. David and Amy stood dumbfounded, their gazes fixed on Lu Sheng, who was still looking down at them from his superior position, his face bearing that same serene and nonchalant expression. Pointing at the 2, he asked if they were planning to come at him one by one as well. David and Amy were stunned. The hairs on the backs of their necks stood on end, and a cold chill began at the base of their spine, quickly spreading throughout their bodies. This young man defeated Rocky with just 1 finger? Amy spoke with difficulty, as if she couldn't believe what she'd just witnessed and needed confirmation. David replied with a troubled expression. He had heard of martial artists who, in their youth, recklessly consume supplements that mess up their internal hormones, causing their bodies to stop developing prematurely. So even in their 30s or 40s, they still look youthful. He thought Lu Sheng was one of those. Amy's face was filled with horror, saying, "The military is so cunning." She then claimed that the military deliberately sent someone like Lu Sheng to deceive them, aiming to catch them off guard. Lu Sheng, having overheard their whispered conversation, rolled his eyes. Lu Sheng smiled, proposing another challenge. If they can make Lu Sheng step back or block just one of his attacks, then it will count as them passing. David and Amy exchanged glances. Without much hesitation, the 2 made a simultaneous decision, demonstrating their perfect synergy. Amy suddenly exploded in a flash of electricity, disappearing in an instant. David, too, took a deep breath, releasing his psychic power. In the blink of an eye, many purple spikes shot out in front of him, moving so fast they were almost impossible to catch with the naked eye. Lu Sheng's eyes gleamed, a small smile gracing his lips. He reached out, trying to snatch the spikes from the air as if catching flies with his bare hand. Hope flashed across David's face, and he muttered, "No matter how powerful Lu Sheng is, underestimating a psychic master, especially a second-level one, is bound to be his regret." Before he could finish, his expression froze, eyes bulging, as if witnessing something inconceivable. Before him, countless arms sprouted from Lu Sheng, each snatching a black spike. All spikes rested in Lu Sheng's palm before falling to the ground with a delicate tinkling sound. Lu Sheng shook his head, a hint of disappointment in his eyes. He then shifted his gaze from the dumbstruck David to Amy, who was rapidly closing in. "Your turn, little Pikachu," he quipped, as Amy, her hand shaped like a claw, aimed for Lu Sheng's neck. The comment distracted her. In that brief moment of distraction, a voice whispered in her ear. The next thing she knew, a pair of slender yet powerful hands gently gripped her wrists. Instinctively, she tried to pull away, but the hands held her fast, immovable as iron. Lu Sheng looked deep into Amy's eyes and calmly told her to electrocute him. Amy thought Lu Sheng was crazy. She unleashed all her elemental power. Streams of deep blue electricity erupted from within her, countless thin lightning waves traveling from her wrists into Lu Sheng's arms. Amy gritted her teeth, channeling all her elemental power into the attack. For a brief moment, Lu Sheng's body stiffened, feeling a prickling numbness and sharp pain. However, as his internal energy began to circulate, this numbing sensation and stiffness lessened, especially when he began to utilize the natural breathing technique. All remnants of the numbness and pain faded rapidly. And thus, Lu Sheng's fourth unique breathing technique was born: the breath of thunder. This was the true reason Lu Sheng challenged Amy. After he had fully mastered the thunder breath, and the electric current from Amy no longer had any evident effect, Lu Sheng let go of her wrists, laughing heartily, telling her that she did well and she have now passed the selection. Her cute little face was flushed red from the exertion of releasing electricity, and Amy was momentarily stunned upon hearing Lu Sheng's words. She stood frozen for a good 5 seconds before her face slowly lit up with immense surprise and excitement. Her face became even more red as if she couldn't quite believe it, mumbling to herself in disbelief. She stood straight and saluted Lu Sheng, expressing her sincere and heartfelt gratitude, saying thank you, and calling Lu Sheng an instructor. Lu Sheng looked at Amy and nodded, telling her she didn't need to thank him. It was her outstanding performance that earned Lu Sheng's approval. Lu Sheng didn't actually know Amy's name, so he had dubbed her Pikachu. He found it rather apt. After all, they both had electric abilities. How different could they be? David and Rocky had complex expressions on their faces, marked by deep disappointment and defeat. While the two of them were lost in their thoughts, 2 men in military uniforms walked out from a nearby passage. One of the officers looked at Lu Sheng with a mix of complexity. Telling him the commander said Lu Sheng had his fun. It's time to return and prepare for the Military Star Award ceremony. Lu Sheng nodded in agreement. Having said that, Lu Sheng followed the officer towards the side door to leave. As for the remaining officer, he looked at the trio with an almost pitying gaze. Amy was completely perplexed at the moment, a sinking feeling of unease welling up in her heart. She asked the real instructor, what did that officer mean just now? She thought the military star was supposed to be her, and wasn't that guy the gatekeeper for the final stage of the selection? The officer looked at the 3 of them with a sympathetic expression, explaining, the guy who just left is also a candidate for this selection, just like the 3 of them. However, he arrived here 20 minutes before they did, and there isn't really a gatekeeper for the final stage of this selection, but rather a beast. Ah, right over there. The officer pointed in a certain direction. The 3 of them followed his pointing finger. What they saw was a golden-eyed demon ape specimen nailed to the wall. The man said the beast used to be alive, with a strength of a peak level 4. It was meant to be a challenge for those candidates with the ability to reach the final stage, a collective target for all of them. But Lu Sheng, he's just too monstrous. He killed the golden-eyed demon ape all by himself. After finishing it off, he wasn't even satisfied, so he posed as the gatekeeper just to toy with them all. This officer seemed to be quite talkative, ranting on without a break. But the trio, particularly Amy, couldn't really focus on anything he said afterward. The only thing that resonated was, that guy, just like them, was a candidate for this selection. The elation on Amy's face froze, and she looked as if she had been turned to stone, standing still in disbelief. Countless voices echoed in Amy's mind, all converging into one overwhelming realization. Meanwhile, inside the selection pathway, Lee tightly clung to a level 4 beast, burning it with all his elemental power. The creature struggled desperately, but in the end, it was consumed by the flames. The young man leaned against the wall, gasping heavily for air. Lee was panting hard, feeling the sharp pain and throbbing aches from multiple wounds on his body. His face contorted momentarily in pain. Extending his right hand, Lee tried to summon a ball of flame. Yet despite his utmost effort, he could only produce a tiny spark. Although he was entirely drained of energy, what did that matter to him? After all, he had just succeeded in killing a level 4 beast. Even Lee himself could hardly believe he had achieved such a spectacular feat. He imagined the instructors and officers monitoring the selection must be utterly astonished by his innate talent and strength. Smiling with confidence, he brushed his hair back and struck what he believed to be a suave pose. Just as Lee was basking in pride, a tall and slender officer holding some documents suddenly jumped in front of him. Lee flinched in surprise, but quickly recognized that the instructor held a tablet, uploading Lee's results. Without even looking up, the officer told him to stop advancing. The selection was over. He should pack up and prepare to leave with him. Lee froze in place. The next moment, his face was lit up with great anticipation. Eagerly, he asked about his results, wanting to know if he was ranked first and had won the military star selection. The officer looked up, sizing Lee up with a puzzled expression. He inquired if Lee was still half asleep since the military star had been decided half an hour ago. The reason the selection dragged on until now was mainly due to... The officer paused, then decided that explaining further would be pointless. Once again, he urged Lee to leave with him, but added that Lee's rank was likely somewhere after 5th place. Lee stood still. He was dumbfounded. Not first, not second, but somewhere after the 5th? He was Lee, the same Lee who single-handedly defeated a level 4 beast on his first try. The instructor looked at him with pity and shook his head. In the monitoring room, General Yu decided to grant Amy a spot in the beast blood pool. He recognized that Amy had her challenges too, and had some emotional damage. The girl's instructor stood up, saluting in gratitude to General Yu. Everyone knew that only the top 3 candidates would earn a spot in the blood pool. Lu Sheng was the undisputed first, Rocky took second, while Amy and David were neck and neck. However, David, being a rare psychic practitioner, had an edge. The instructors were pleased with the outcome. Upon leaving the selection pathway, he was guided to a bigger room than he had stayed in before. The room had been cleaned, and 2 types of supplements were placed on the small table beside the bed. Lu Sheng picked up the energy replenishment elixir from the table, uncapped it, and poured it into his mouth. Savoring the effects of the elixir, he found it rather underwhelming. The refreshing sensation it provided lasted only for a brief few minutes. Compared to the supplements he crafted himself, this was subpar. Lying on the bed, Lu Sheng suddenly thought of Ling Su. He wondered how the supplement was progressing. Ever since he left Whitewater City, he hadn't been in contact with her. After consuming the supplement, Lu Sheng sat on the bed, immersing himself in the thunder-breathing technique he had recently obtained through the help of Amy aka Pikachu. It seemed as though he could hear a deep rumbling, much like the sound of thunder rolling within storm clouds, echoing within his chest. The circulating breath stimulated his entire body, including his muscles, blood, and bones. He felt an increase in both strength and speed. This technique synthesized the advantages of both the flame-breathing and wind-breathing, yet it didn't achieve the peak of either. Overall, it was a balanced and comprehensive breathing technique. After experimenting with the thunder-breathing, Lu Sheng sprawled out on the bed, looking at the ceiling. The bed wasn't particularly soft, but Lu Sheng felt utterly relaxed. For the longest time, he had been like a tightly drawn bowstring, never getting a moment of relaxation. Now, with the results of the military star selection settled, he could finally take a rest. He reminisced about the times he and his best friend stayed up all night playing games, sleeping in class, and experiencing the life of a normal high school student. Lately, he wondered if he was pushing himself too hard. Lu Sheng raised a hand, peering through the gaps between his fingers at the ceiling above, lost in thought. What did a future 10,000 years from now have to do with him? Without the weight of that distant future, he could lead a relaxed and carefree life. In 10,000 years, he would be long gone. How many of his descendants would even remember him? One might not even know about their next life. Why not live this one to the fullest and be content? He pondered. Wouldn't that be better? Lu Sheng's thoughts began to drift, and it felt as if something inside him was slowly drifting away too. Yet in the end, the fingers he held up before his eyes slowly clenched into a fist. His expression became serious and resolute. Having witnessed the future firsthand, how could he pretend he hadn't? Having made a choice, how could he easily give up? He wasn't just fighting for the people 10,000 years from now, but also for himself. To give it your all, gritting your teeth, persisting even when broken, not everyone can have such conviction. Lu Sheng's eyes settled into a calm state. He was here, he saw, and he is willing to die for it. This was his choice, his desire. Closing his eyes, he felt he had broken another bottleneck. No time to procrastinate, and it was time to continue striving to become stronger. He entered the dream realm once again. Upon entering the dream realm, the first thing Lu Sheng did was pull up his personal record to inspect. There were some minor changes this time. Name, Lu Sheng. Gender, male. Lifespan, born 297 martial years, died in 432 martial years. Martial strength, 7th level Grand Master. His lifetime achievements had a new entry, participated in the military star selection, and emerged in the first place. The overall data was roughly the same as what Lu Sheng saw last time, only looked a bit better. There was no change in the martial arts level, which remained at the 7th level Grandmaster. However, his character evaluation gained an additional half star, reaching 3.5 stars. This was probably related to Lu Sheng's decision to join the Eastern Military District and eventually become a major general there. This also meant that Lu Sheng lived 20 years less than before, dying in a large-scale battle against a beast. He wondered if he could have broken through to the 8th level Grandmaster if he hadn't died, but quickly dismissed the thought. Such mundane and meaningless speculations weren't worth delving into. Suddenly, Lu Sheng noticed something on his profile that made him raise an eyebrow. The name listed under the spouse category was Snowy? Lu Sheng was stunned. He pulled out an image of a wedding photo and saw Snowy's tall, slender figure with her cold yet stunning beauty. Lu Sheng realized that she was much older than him. How did they end up marrying? It felt utterly ridiculous to Lu Sheng. However, thinking about it, becoming the rising military star of the Eastern Military District meant he would inevitably join their ranks. And since Snowy was also part of the same district, given their past relationship and growing closeness over time, maybe such a union wasn't entirely out of the realm of possibility. He shook his head helplessly. From now on, it would be difficult for him to look directly at Snowy. Lu Sheng needs to do something to calm down. With that thought, Lu Sheng swiftly headed towards the position of the female Grand Master. An officer came to invite Lu Sheng to the military star selection ceremony. Lu Sheng followed behind the officer, heading deeper into the base. They eventually reached the entrance of a grand conference hall. Pushing the door open, all eyes within the room turned to Lu Sheng. Lu Sheng saw Snowy and Qin. The other instructors and students were present too, including Rocky and the other two he had met during the selection process. He also noticed a middle-aged man in military uniform, gold stars adorning his shoulder, exuding an aura of imposing authority. Lu Sheng guessed that this man must be the highest-ranking officer for this year's selection, Major General Yu of the Eastern Military District. Upon seeing Lu Sheng entering the room, General Yu greeted him with a warm smile as if he was seeing Lu Sheng as a younger family member of his, beckoning him to come over. At that moment, nearly all eyes in the conference hall were fixated on Lu Sheng. Then, one by one, badges and rewards were presented by the officers. Lu Sheng's badge was a brilliant gold. General Yu personally pinned it on him. Its material was the same as that of a Grandmaster's badge, only differing in design. General Yu hoped that one day Lu Sheng would wear the true Grandmaster's badge. With a solemn expression, Lu Sheng replied calmly while putting his hand into a fist. That day won't be too far off. General Yu was momentarily taken aback, but then he burst into joyful laughter. The expressions of everyone in the room were mixed. Hearing these words, none of the people doubted Lu Sheng, and Lu Sheng said it without coming across as arrogant. It seemed as though he was merely stating an inevitable fact. Every year, the Eastern Military District held the military star selection, but none have ever been treated by General Yu with such a demeanor. Lu Sheng was the first. Subsequently, it is time to give out the rewards. Those ranked in the top 10 each received a reward of vials of beast blood. Lu Sheng received one as well. It was a small vial, containing about 300 milliliters of a red liquid. With a grand gesture, General Yu led the way out of the conference hall. Lu Sheng, Rocky, David, and Amy, followed by their respective instructors, while the rest could only watch them with envious eyes. They knew that they were about to enter the beast blood pool and the marrow pool. Only those in the top 3 had the privilege to enter the beast blood pool. However, due to the exceptional performance of the prodigious Lu Sheng, General Yu, in high spirits, even added an extra slot for 4th place. Li thought of the full pool of beast blood and beast marrow which he had no chance of getting. The once arrogant young boy suddenly felt that the small vial of beast blood he held was no longer enticing. Soon, they arrived in a brightly lit room filled with various apparatuses and tubes. General Yu turned to Lu Sheng and the others, instructing them to remove their clothing and prepare to enter the cultivation chambers. Except for Lu Sheng, everyone was led to cultivation chambers filled with beast blood. After undressing, they all entered their respective chambers, while Lu Sheng was led by General Yu to the beast marrow pool. Lu Sheng saw before him a cultivation chamber about 2 meters high and 1 meter in diameter, filled halfway with a pale golden liquid. He curiously gazed at the amber-like fluid flowing gently behind the clear glass and couldn't help but ask, "Why is it only half filled? Why not fill it up?" Snowy rolled her eyes and said exasperatedly, questioning if Lu Sheng was aware of the cost of these valuable beast marrows. This alone cost over 1.5 billion, and that's just the cost. If sold, the price would be 10 times more. Lu Sheng nodded in amazement, but then asked seriously, "What if it's not enough for him to absorb? Can he get a refill?" Snowy was speechless. Another officer chimed in, chuckling. After stripping down, Lu Sheng entered the marrow pool. Snowy looked him over and couldn't help but blush while admiring the fluidity and perfection of his muscles and his tall, proportionate physique, commenting softly that she didn't expect that. Lu Sheng had a pretty good build. With a splash, Lu Sheng jumped into the cultivation chamber. As he submerged, the pale gold liquid reached up to his neck. It felt as if needles were desperately pressing against his skin, trying to burrow into him. He dove deeper, letting the pale golden liquid engulf him completely. Now, the energies inside the chamber, which felt almost alive, rapidly surged into his body. The overwhelming energy rampaged inside him like a raging flood. Every inch of his skin, every fiber of his flesh, even every strand of his hair, was immersed in the embrace of energy, greedily absorbing it. The influx of massive energy propelled his physique further down the path of the indestructible golden body technique. His blood energy level was skyrocketing every second, roaring through his veins, evolving to a consistency as thick as mercury. David was the first to emerge from the cultivation chamber. Throughout the process, there was a constant crackling sound from his body, indicative of his rapidly advancing martial prowess and vastly improved physical strength. An officer nearby handed him a large towel. David took it, wiping away the residual liquid. The officer complimented David, saying he nearly drained the chamber, truly worthy of being called a prodigy. David chuckled, but then curiously asked, "What about the others?" The officer glanced to the side, informing him that he was the first to come out. Upon hearing that he was the first to come out of the chamber, the smugness he had just felt disappeared instantly. The officer comforted him that he relies on psychic power and not physical strength. David knew that the longer one stayed in the beast blood pool, the more energy they absorbed, and the greater the benefits received. Minutes later, Amy also came out of the chamber. She was extremely excited that she would soon break the bottleneck and become a level 4 martial artist. Finally, Rocky's chamber opened. Among the three, Rocky was the strongest, and through the beast's blood, he directly advanced to the 5th level. David and Amy's pupils constricted slightly, their hearts throbbing with shock. Seeing that Rocky reached level 5 without fully absorbing the first chamber was very surprising to them. The officer next to them said they got it wrong. This was the second batch. Sure enough, the two saw an empty container next to Rocky's cultivation chamber, still containing some remnants of the beast's blood. The two thought to themselves, in the second chamber, which means, at about the same time as them, Rocky managed to absorb 2/3 more of the beast's blood than they did. Absorbing 2/3 more of the beast's blood, one can only imagine the immense benefits Rocky obtained. The look in David and Amy's eyes when they looked at Rocky became a lot more complicated. Just as Rocky was about to get dressed, he took a few steps he couldn't believe his eyes. General Yu walked up to the cultivation chamber, looking at the boy with closed eyes inside the transparent glass and asked, "How did it go? Was it smooth?" Snowy nodded, smiling, and said, "It's just that the consumption of the special marrow is a bit fast." Watching the pale gold liquid level that was about to drop below eye level, General Yu casually said, "Give Lu Sheng as much as he could absorb. Pour everything from the reserve chamber to ensure the best results." Suddenly, a staff member mentioned that the extra beast marrow in the reserve chamber was already used up. General Yu paused for a moment. His expression became serious. Staring at the boy with closed eyes in the cultivation chamber, he instructed the staff to quickly check the warehouse, remarking that he wanted to see just how much of a surprise this kid could give him. Another container of beast marrow was poured into the cultivation chamber, submerging Lu Sheng's head. Then, at a speed visible to the naked eye, it rapidly diminished. Lu Sheng repeatedly honed his indestructible golden body technique over and over, tempering every muscle and bone in his body. Another 2 containers of 4th-level beast marrow were brought forward. General Yu's face remained expressionless, but his hands behind his back were trembling slightly. "Continue!" he ordered. Lu Sheng felt as if countless volcanoes inside him had suddenly erupted. He could distinctly sense energy continuously flowing into his body, seemingly inexhaustible. Just half a container of this unique marrow could bring such immense energy, aiding Lu Sheng in completing the first phase of the indestructible golden body. If this is the power of 4th-level beast marrow, how terrifying would the 5th, 6th, 7th, or even higher levels be? It's almost unimaginable. At the same time, the staff looked toward General Yu and asked if they should continue. Everyone in the room glanced at the side of the cultivation chamber, which had over a dozen empty glass containers. General Yu's lips quivered slightly. Even as a 7th-level grandmaster and also a major general, he was finding it hard to keep calm. He ordered them to keep adding until Lu Sheng couldn't absorb any more. He ordered with a surge of anger, "If this kid doesn't join the Eastern Military District in the future, General Yu swears that he will skin him alive." The cost of a single container of the unique marrow was over 1 billion. He had already spent over 10 billion. Was there a black hole inside Lu Sheng? Lu Sheng saw that every bone in his body had turned golden, gleaming brilliantly. The first phase of the indestructible golden body was complete. Between his bones and muscles, something seemed to be germinating and growing. He had successfully advanced to a 4th-level martial artist. His physique and martial arts had made a monumental breakthrough, and his overall combat capability was about to witness an unprecedented enhancement. The chamber suddenly burst open, and General Yu could hardly believe that Lu Sheng had absorbed all the beast's marrow. Lu Sheng leaped out of the cultivation chamber. As his feet touched the ground, the floor cracked beneath him. A tall, statuesque figure stood there, with droplets of golden liquid trickling down the contours of his chiseled muscles, creating small puddles on the floor. The female officers and Snowy in the room all stared at Lu Sheng. His entire body radiated a golden glow. When Rocky, David, and the others arrived, they knew that the gap between them and Lu Sheng had grown even larger. Snowy gave a bitter smile, acknowledging that in just 2 months, Lu Sheng had become even more powerful than her. General Yu's gaze was intense, and suddenly he took a step forward, reaching out to grab the spirited young man in front of him. However, Lu Sheng didn't avoid the grasp. Instead, his face lit up with excitement. He tensed his right arm, preparing for the forceful punch. Tenfold stellar force, Grand Master technique, 10 suns in the sky. Lu Sheng's body emits a fiery glow. The fists and broad palms clashed hard against each other. Lu Sheng stepped back several times, leaving cracks in the hard floor with every step. Shaking his sore arm, Lu Sheng gave a wry smile and said, "General Yu used too much force on a 4th-level martial artist." General Yu's eyes sparkled, and he burst into hearty laughter. The aura of a grand master surged around him like tidal waves. He complimented Lu Sheng, saying that his combat strength didn't look like someone who just advanced to the 4th level. Lu Sheng spreads his hands helplessly, but he is at the 4th level. General Yu, with an annoyed look on his face, retorted, "He doesn't care if Lu Sheng is at the 4th level or not. After consuming 15 billion worth of his beast marrow, getting one slap from him is still considered light." The officers and students who rushed over, including Lu Sheng himself, were in shock at the scattered containers labeled 4th-level beast marrow across the floor. Even if they knew that General Yu would not use his full strength, the attack was still a genuine blow from a level 7 Grandmaster. A Grandmaster-level martial artist has a minimum combat power of 1,000,000. How could anyone like Lu Sheng easily withstand such force? At this very moment, the gazes of all the officers and students in the chamber room shifted towards Lu Sheng. Rocky, David, and Amy were utterly dumbfounded. A direct hit from a Grand Master and 15 billion worth of the beast marrow. They always knew there was a wide gap between them and Lu Sheng, but never imagined it would be this big. At the 4th level, Lu Sheng might already possess the combat power of 500,000, which is equivalent to a peak level 6 martial artist. The overwhelming force overshadowed everything, and they couldn't fathom how Lu Sheng managed to take on General Yu's attack. Just thinking of this sent shivers down their spines, filling them with a sense of terror. David trembled from head to toe, while Amy felt as if her soul had been ripped out. Snowy and Chin gazed at Lu Sheng, thinking about the fact that he was still a high school student who hadn't even taken the unified exam yet. At that thought, Chin turned to Snowy, who nodded in agreement. They both reached the same conclusion. Lu Sheng would undoubtedly score the top in the unified exam this year. Rocky stared at the scattered containers on the ground, recalling that Lu Sheng, of the same age as him, was already having a combat power of 500,000. What would happen when he advances to level 5, or level 6? Would he truly be on par with a Grandmaster? Recalling that now that Lu Sheng had already displayed the will of a Grandmaster, becoming one was inevitable. Only then did Lu Sheng realize something. He had absorbed a significant amount of 4th-level beast marrow. No wonder he felt that the energy was a bit exaggerated earlier, and for some reason it had been continuously replenishing. He gave an awkward smile while thanking General Yu. After all, it was worth 15 billion. General Yu wasn't stingy. The favor General Yu has shown to Lu Sheng is indeed very generous. General Yu waved his hand dismissively, saying lightly, telling Lu Sheng there was no need to thank him. When Lu Sheng gets on the battlefield, just slay a few more beasts. That way it won't be a waste of all this beast marrow from my eastern military district. Lu Sheng nodded, clasping his hands together in a respectful gesture. With a serious expression, he believed that facing the enemy on the battlefield was every martial artist's duty. He would let his actions speak for him. General Yu looked at the young man with satisfaction, as if he saw a glimpse of a marshal in him. Turning around with a joyful laugh, he briefly bid farewell to Lu Sheng. However, he believed that the next time they met, Lu Sheng would surely become a Grand Master, and he was confident that day wasn't far off. Snowy approached Lu Sheng, informing him that the military star selection DAD concluded successfully. She offered her congratulations, and then inquired about Lu Sheng's preparation for the unified exam. When she asked which university he was aiming for, Lu Sheng was puzzled and wanted to listen to Snowy for recommendations. Snowy smiled, saying, With Lu Sheng's current strength, any university in the country is at his disposal. If Lu Sheng is looking at the eastern region, then Dongning Martial University is the best choice. After all, Lu Sheng was originally from Dongning Province, so he'll undoubtedly receive special treatment and benefits there. However, her expression suddenly turned serious. This was her opinion and recommendations before. A month ago, she would have surely advised Lu Sheng to attend there. But now, Snowy wanted Lu Sheng to head to the royal capital, Snowy continued, her voice earnest. Because in the royal capital, there are 7 divine martial universities, the birthplaces of their nation's martial arts. It's where the entire nation's most elite martial talents gather. After joining one of the 7 divine martial universities, if Lu Sheng could break the record of the divine martial tower, he could earn the favor of a martial saint. Under the guidance of a martial saint, there's a high possibility of breaking through and becoming an 8th-level grandmaster. Martial saint, a distant and unfamiliar title. Snowy's expression grew solemn. Martial saints are the pillars of their world, possessing martial prowess beyond imagination. Their authority even surpasses that of military districts and national powers. Currently, their nation boasts 3 9th-level martial saints: the Supreme Martial Saint, Zhao Ji, the Jade Martial Saint, Tan Zhongyu, and the only female martial saint, the Dark Star Martial Saint, Lin Zhengyue. Lu Sheng recalled viewing the timeline in the dream realm. At this stage, the strongest in this world were only at the 9th level, which meant that the martial saints stood at the pinnacle. After a brief moment of silence, Snowy spoke first. She can't make decisions for Lu Sheng because she can't predict his future. But Snowy believes Lu Sheng's future may reach farther than anyone else's, perhaps even beyond that of a martial saint. Lu Sheng looked at her, slightly surprised. He hadn't expected Snowy to hold him in such high regard, but considering his 3 martial techniques, passed down by the strongest level 11 martial artists in the future, along with the knowledge and martial arts experience spanning 10,000 years in the future, he was confident that his future achievements would indeed surpass that of a martial saint. From a distance, Qin watched the two. Hearing Snowy speculate that Lu Sheng, currently at only the 4th level, might one day surpass the level of a martial saint's, he was initially skeptical. However, in an instant, he felt he might have misjudged. The unparalleled talent that Lu Sheng demonstrated suggested that his future might not be so limited after all. Snowy looked downcast, remarking, "The highest rank in the entire military district is the Grand Marshal, who has only reached the 8th-level Grandmaster level. He's never been able to break through to the 9th-level Martial Saint." Lu Sheng asked, "Even with the resources of the entire military district, can he not break through?" Qin slowly approached, shaking his head. "It's far more complicated than he thought. There may be only 1 level difference between the 8th and 9th levels, but to cultivate an 8th-level Grandmaster, the military has already exhausted all its top-tier resources. The 9th level isn't something that can be achieved just by relying on resources. The gap between the 2 levels is immense and almost unfathomable, hence why 8th level is still the Grandmaster, while the 9th level is the Saint. Having a 9th-grade martial saint has always been a long-cherished wish of their military. Alas, it remains unfulfilled." Snowy sighed. As an officer of the Eastern Military District, she should encourage Lu Sheng to stay here, but she doesn't want to hold Lu Sheng back. She hopes that Lu Sheng can choose his own path, and she will always support Lu Sheng's decision. Hearing this, Lu Sheng's heart skipped a beat. Standing before him was Snowy, clad in a deep blue military uniform. Under the brim of her cap, she had a perfect oval face, perfect skin, and exquisite, stunning features. He thought about the potential future if he stayed in the Eastern Military District. He might indeed end up marrying Snowy, as the information from the dream realm suggested. Avoiding Snowy's gaze, he said with conviction, "Lu Sheng is grateful for all of Snowy's help. Just like his promise to General Yu, Lu Sheng will one day set foot on the battlefield to defend their homeland. It's both his duty and obligation. Lu Sheng will never forget or let the Eastern Military District and Snowy down." Snowy's face lit up with a relieved smile. Looking deeply into Lu Sheng's eyes, She looked forward to the day Lu Sheng returned to the Eastern Military District. After a few seconds, they both blushed, and Lu Sheng coughed awkwardly. He didn't want to linger in this odd atmosphere alone with Snowy. But Qin seemed to have noticed something. Looking left and right, he appeared as if he'd discovered a whole new world. Before parting, Snowy told Lu Sheng that the military star selection was over. The unified exam is just around the corner. She wanted Lu Sheng to make sure to get a certificate from the Psychic Association before the exam. Then, he will have access to the StarNet, allowing him to freely trade goods online. Lu Sheng nodded in acknowledgement, ready to pack up and head out. Watching Lu Sheng, Snowy hesitated. Words were lingering on the tip of her tongue, emotions she wanted to express, but she just couldn't find the right words. As he grew distant, Qin approached, a mischievous grin on his face. In all these years of knowing Snowy, that's the first time he's seen such an expression from her. Perhaps Snowy have some feeling for Lu Sheng. Before he could finish, Snowy, flustered, landed a couple of playful punches on him, shushing his presumptuous remarks. Frustrated, she stormed off, hiding behind a door. There, she took a moment, heart fluttering, realizing this was the first time she'd felt this way about someone of the opposite gender, and it just happened to a man who's much younger than her. After a day's rest, above a forest located in the Dongning province, a massive black military helicopter hovered over a hill. The cabin door slid open. Amid the gushing winds that tousled everyone's hair, Snowy shouted over the noise, asking Lu Sheng if he was sure about alighting here. Clutching the helicopter's door, backpack strapped to his back, Lu Sheng turned, giving them a reassuring smile. Snowy was about to instruct the helicopter to lower its altitude so she could release a ladder, but before she could, Lu Sheng said there was no need. He waved a final goodbye, then released his grip and plunged towards the ground below. Stunned, Snowy could only watch as Lu Sheng rapidly diminished in size. Beside her, Qin darted forward, peering out in disbelief. Calling Lu Sheng crazy! That's a 200-meter drop! Lu Sheng wasn't even wearing a parachute. He is out of his mind! Snowy, ever the calm one, simply replied, "He won't get hurt." She stared below, realizing that the young man's abilities had long surpassed both of theirs. Relieved, Qin let out a sigh, shaking his head with a complicated expression. On the mountain below, a father and son were hiking. The dad held his son's hand, guiding him step by step. Suddenly, the little boy looked up and pointed to a figure in the sky. Above them, a dot rapidly grew larger, a silhouette descending from the heavens, enveloped in a golden glow. "Is that Superman?" the boy asked. Soon the man's gaze followed his son's. His pupils constricted the next second. He knew that the figure from the sky must have been a very powerful martial artist, at least of the 6th level, perhaps a grandmaster. The gales whipped past his ears. Lu Sheng, having undergone the first phase of immortal golden body refinement, felt every inch of his body, including muscles, bones, skin, and even his internal organs, undergo an immense transformation. Far surpassing the usual 4th, 5th, or even 6th level martial artists, he landed heavily on the mountain peak. The terrifying force shattered the ground beneath him, creating a massive crater. Looking down at the city below, he could still feel the vigorous energy coursing through him after reaching the 4th level. It might take about a month for this energy to fully integrate. He dashed forward, making his way down the mountain path. Lu Sheng noticed that his inner strength was golden in hue. Glancing at his hands, they seemed unbreakable. The father and son watched Lu Sheng in awe. The father, being a martial artist himself, managed to catch a brief glimpse of the falling figure. An extremely young-looking teenager, appearing to be around 18 years old, just like a high schooler. And this high schooler had just fallen hundreds of meters without a scratch? The man chuckled, shaking his head, thinking to himself that maybe Lu Sheng was equipped with some high-tech gear. Yet his expression was complex. Looking at the crater Lu Sheng left behind, his son persisted, asking his father once again, "Was that big brother a Superman?" The father took his son's hand, trying to divert the boy's attention, saying, "There's no Superman, they're just shooting a movie." The boy followed his father uphill, albeit reluctantly, his eyes fixed on the direction where Lu Sheng had disappeared. In the young boy's heart, Lu Sheng was definitely Superman. He thought to himself, his dad just won't admit it. Lu Sheng quickly arrived at the Psychic Association. The place seemed deserted, and he made his way directly to the front desk. There, he found a young man engrossed in his smartphone playing Genshin Impact. When he saw Lu Sheng's recommendation letter, his expression shifted to one of complete astonishment. He looked at Lu Sheng, who seemed to have no psychic power, but given that the recommendation was from the military district, he treated Lu Sheng with respect. After all, he himself was formerly from the military. The young man promptly got up to lead Lu Sheng further inside. Following the young man, Lu Sheng entered a room where he saw 3 people, 2 young women and a balding middle-aged man. The middle-aged man was visibly shaking, intently focusing on controlling a metallic orb. As Lu Sheng observed, orbs of sweat formed on the man's forehead as he tried guiding the orb through a glass wall. Suddenly the ball wobbled, and not long after, it collided with the glass, causing a clear, shattering sound. Large cracks spread rapidly across the surface of the glass wall. The middle-aged man's concentration wavered, and the metallic orb dropped to the ground. Distraught, he stared at the orb. This was already his 6th attempt within the last decade. A staff member from the side consoled him, suggesting that breakthroughs at the man's age were hard to come by. Tearfully, the balding man left the room. Next up was a girl named Sophia. She had long, wavy blonde hair and a striking figure. The staff seemed familiar with her, noting that this was her 3rd time taking the test. Sophia responded with a huff, boasting that she became a level 1 psychic at the age of 20. Being 25 now, she felt that failing the level 2 exam a few times was nothing unusual. The staff member now turned his attention to Lu Sheng. The young man from the front desk gestured toward him and mentioned that he came with a recommendation from Snowy and had a referral letter from the military district. Sophia looked at Lu Sheng with curiosity, finding it hard to believe that such a young face could belong to a psychic practitioner. But regardless of Lu Sheng's abilities, she found him very handsome. Drawing closer, she introduced herself and complimented Lu Sheng on becoming a psychic practitioner at such a young age. She generously offered her help should he have any questions. Lu Sheng nodded in gratitude, then inquired if the task the bald man was attempting earlier was part of the assessment. Sophia, speaking from experience, began explaining to him the stages of the test. The first stage measures the strength and purity of one's psychic power using a machine. The second stage is a practical test where participants are required to control a certain number of small balls and guide them through holes in fragile glass walls without touching them. She explained that the glass is so delicate that a mere touch would shatter it. The bald man, being a level 1 psychic practitioner, had only 1 layer of glass to navigate through. But for her, as a level 2 psychic practitioner, she'd have to pass through 5 layers. Sophia clasped her hands and prayed fervently, hoping for a smooth process. When it was her turn, she nodded to the staff and quickly approached the machine, placing her hand on it. Soon, the hexagonal column lit up, and her results were displayed. The screen showed a psychic power strength of 11.33 and a purity level of 1.02. It was a borderline pass. Seeing this, Sophia breathed a sigh of relief. Now came the practical test. Unlike the level 1 assessment, a level 2 psychic had to control 15 metallic orbs simultaneously. The number of glass layers these orbs had to pass through was 5. However, the time allotted for this task was shortened to 20 seconds. With a solemn expression, Sophia used her psychic abilities to levitate the 15 metallic orbs in front of her. She looked visibly tense. Sophia took a deep breath and then rapidly controlled the 15 metallic orbs to shoot forward. Lu Sheng quickly realized that controlling 15 of these metallic orbs made out of mithril at the same time was a significant challenge for a level 2 psychic practitioner. At the same time, the psychic power needs to be restrained as much as possible. Participants need to simultaneously focus on 15 orbs and operate them closely. It looked far from easy. Sophia managed to swiftly pass the first layer of glass, full of confidence, and the second layer followed shortly after. She quickly adjusted their positions and managed to get through the third layer as well. Just as she was confident that she could reach the fourth layer, the staff member called out, stating that her first attempt had failed due to time being up. Deflated, Sophia didn't appear too upset. Taking a deep breath, she braced herself for another go. When she began, she picked up the pace from her previous attempt. The first 3 layers were smoothly cleared, the fourth was narrowly navigated, and with 12 seconds left, she headed for the 5th layer. Perhaps trying to make up for her previous mistake, Sophia tried to go faster. As a result, a few of the metallic orbs touched the fragile 5th glass wall. A shattering sound echoed through the room, and the orbs dropped to the ground. Sophia collapsed, her face twisted into a bitter smile. She had failed again. The staff members didn't say anything but asked if she'd like to try once more. Sophia understood that she was still a way off from becoming a level 2 psychic master. At this moment, a voice rang out,